it is the case that this report has attracted much commentary from the political ombudsman, who has written to the Prime Minister and copied the letter to us and to others. In the letter dated July 10th, the National Integrity Action and others, and have also commented on the issue. And we should also bear in mind that this report comes against the backdrop of Jamaica having fallen 13 places in the global anti-corruption index over the past 12 months. What the report of the Contractor General highlights in relation to the e-bushing program is that there were breaches of the procurement laws and guidelines of the government of Jamaica, that there were breaches of the code of political conduct, and I should say that this has been highlighted particularly by the political ombudsman in her letter to the Prime Minister of July 10th, and that there were further implied breaches of accepted standards of good governance. Let us recount the relevant timelines. On November 3rd, 2016, there was an announcement of the local government elections. On November 16th, the National Works Agency, which was the implementing agency, was advised of a cabinet decision to implement the program in the total value of some $606 million. And they were advised to engage some specifically named contractors, 5 contractors. On November 18th, 2 days after they were informed to execute the program, contracts were signed with the contractors 2 days after, and work commenced immediately. And on November 28th, local government elections were held. Not until December 28th was there any notification given to the National Contracts Commission, which has overall responsibility for the administration of government contracts in the country. The Contractor General was clear on the following. 1. The Cabinet of Jamaica, at a time when flood repairs were needed in eastern Jamaica, breached the guidelines of the Contractor General's Act by not awarding contracts impartially and on merit. There were clear breaches by the Cabinet when they awarded contracts of $600 million after nomination day. These were breaches impliedly of the Code of Political Conduct. 5 contractors were selected by the Cabinet, and the areas in which work should be done was also selected by the Cabinet. There was 1 additional contractor named after the original 5 were selected, and the work areas changed, and that those instructions were transmitted by Minister Chang directly to the National Works Agency. Interestingly, all the contractors were road contractors, but contractors specifically qualified for sanitation and drainage clearing, which is what was involved here, were not included in the selection. The Contractor General's report further states that the work was substandard and not well done. Debris was not cleared and trucked from the site as was specifically required by the contracts. And in some cases, debris was burned on the roads, which was specifically prohibited by the contracts which were signed. The Contractor General points out also that there was no evidence of any joint inspection of the work sites by the National Works Agency officials and company representatives of the contractors, as is usually the case in contracts of this order. He also points out, that is to say the Contractor General, that the usual payment procedures were not followed. Payment vouchers were not signed by the usual persons. Subcontractors were settled only by JLP MPs and cabinet members, and that, as I said, was outlined in the Contractor General's report. The whole thing was done in haste, 11 days between the draft cabinet submission and notification for contractors to proceed on November 18th. The question arises, what was the emergency? There was no sudden development or emergency that required this breach of the guidelines. There is also an issue raised by the Contractor General in that the profit margins for the contractors that were selected by the JLP cabinet were in excess of the usual standard 15% profit margin that is typical in contracts of this case, of this sort. In one case, the profit margin was 76.4%. In the context of the unprecedented nature of the program and an abnormally high profit margin of 76% for the contractor which received the highest value contract, one must question the motives of all involved in this program. The contract with the highest value was for $183 million, of which $176.9 billion was actually disbursed. Based upon the conclusions of the Contractor General, the profit margin from that contract was $135 million. The question must be asked, how can the Holness administration justify one contractor who was specifically selected by the cabinet receiving profits of $135 million from payments of $176 million? In summary, there is a scandalous and unfortunate pattern of behavior that is evident right across all areas of conduct of this JLP administration. What we see is their increasing use of public resources provided by the taxpayers of Jamaica for private purposes, either of the cabinet and the JLP, or of individuals making up the cabinet. This is evident in this $600 million debushing program. It is evident also in the recently revealed benefits secured by a senior cabinet minister under a program for dairy farmers that was administered by his own ministry. That's the Mombasa grass issue. We see it also in the recent phone bill scandal, which is currently being played out. And we see it also in the overruling of the NEPA recommendations regarding sand mining in Dunkirks, where the applicant who appealed was a former JLP candidate. Especially in light of the scandalous conduct of the current JLP administration, we need to restore public confidence in the standards of governance in the country. Indeed, this past May we wrote to the Prime Minister specifically suggesting the establishment of a National Oversight Committee to ensure non-partisanship in the implementation of major infrastructure programs. Specifically in that case, we wrote concerning the need for a national flood mitigation program. We have not thus far received a reply. Nevertheless, we are going to outline once again some specific demands on behalf of the public to ensure that the breaches that were outlined by the contractor general do not recur in public administration in Jamaica. Taxpayers work too hard and face too difficult a circumstance to have their resources wasted in this scandalous fashion by the current Jamaica Labour Party administration. Specifically, we support the recommendation of the political ombudsman in relation to the road works being implemented under the major infrastructure development program. Specifically, the political ombudsman recommends that regular reports be provided to the Parliament regarding the implementation of this program. We should remind you that what this program provides for is that there are $3 billion of works being undertaken in 26 constituencies. 24 of those constituencies are represented by Jamaica Labour Party representatives, and 2 are represented by People's National Party representatives in a parliament that has 32-31. And the value of the programs in the JLP constituencies is $2.8 billion of the $3 billion, and the value of the work to be undertaken in PNP constituencies is $190 million. Secondly, it is obvious in the case of the debushing program that the provisions of emergency procurement were deliberately exploited and misused. There was no emergency other than the politically conceived emergency of the Jamaica Labour Party in their effort to contest the local government elections. Emergency procurement rules were intended to take account of circumstances such as floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, etc., which need rapid and immediate response. This was obviously not the case here. We accordingly insist that the procurement guidelines and laws need to be amended to require that all emergency procurement initiatives be reported to the Parliament at the earliest possible time, including a statement as to what areas of the emergency require what intervention and in which communities. Also, we are insisting that all major infrastructural work should be supervised by a national oversight committee involving national stakeholders in addition to representatives of the 2 main parties. Included among the stakeholders that we would consider appropriate would be the Jamaica Institution of Engineers and the Master Builders Association, and others could be considered. But it is obvious from the present circumstances that the country continues to run the risk that public resources are wasted and misused for political purposes and for the benefit of individuals within the Jamaica Labour Party, and that is absolutely unacceptable. These proposals would represent for us in the People's National Party an essential element in the improved governance structures which the country so urgently needs if we are to restore public trust in the political process and to revive confidence in the purposes of our nation. There are other elements that will form part of our proposals to restore public trust, and we will present these on a later occasion. Nevertheless, we are insisting now that the JLP government undertakes the necessary corrective measures. And we are specifically insisting that those who have been named in the Contractor General's report as being in breach of the laws or being in breach of public trust by having misrepresented facts to the Contractor General should be held to account. Thank you very much.